Why Bruno Guimarães makes Arsenal unfair.
Away win this season. Forward ball. Oh, mistake at the back. Bruno, surely. Bruno seals it.
This isn't just another big money signing. It's the move that could completely break the Premier League.
This is the best deal, the best signing any team has made this summer.
For years, Bruno Guimarães had to do everything at Newcastle: defend, build attacks, dictate the tempo, and carry the midfield almost by himself.
You know, Bruno has been the best player in Newcastle since he's been there, really. You know, hit the ground running, been massive.
But at Arsenal, he won't have to, because Mikel Arteta has built the perfect system to unleash the most dangerous version of Bruno we've ever seen.
I think now he's at Arsenal, he's about to get all of his bloody flowers, all of his ratings.
Put him alongside Declan Rice, Martin Zubimendi, Martin Ødegaard and Eberechi Eze, and suddenly Arsenal don't just have the best midfield in England, they might have the best midfield in world football. By the end of this video, you'll understand why this transfer changes far more than Arsenal's starting 11. It could completely change the balance of power in Europe. What happens when you take half a player's job away overnight? Not because he's getting worse, but because someone else is finally doing it for him. That's the question sitting underneath this whole transfer. And the answer starts with Declan Rice. Rice isn't just a good defensive midfielder. He covers ground most players in his position simply can't. His recovery pace lets him close gaps behind Bruno in seconds, and his ball-winning ability means he can clean up mistakes before they turn into real problems.
Imagine a pivot of Rice and Bruno Guimarães. Many of you don't understand how dangerous and how lethal that is.
At Newcastle, Bruno never had a partner built quite like this. He had to be the release valve and the destroyer at the same time. Next to Rice, that changes completely.
The mobility doesn't become as much of a question mark here, because now the guy was playing with Tonali before, who in his own right is an athlete. You're putting him next to Declan Rice now, in a team that is already so protected defensively too.
With Rice mopping up behind him, Bruno doesn't need to sit back and think defense first anymore.
Bruno Guimarães is complete. Bruno Guimarães can go in there, play next to Declan Rice, playing a more further forward role as an 8.
He can push higher up the pitch, press with real aggression, and hunt the ball the way he wants to, instead of the way his old team needed him to. That front-footed version of Bruno existed at Newcastle in flashes. At Arsenal, it becomes the standard, not the exception. This fits Arteta's setup almost too well. Arsenal play a high-intensity, structured possession game that demands players who are technically composed under pressure, but still physical enough to win the ball back fast. Bruno checks both boxes in a way very few midfielders in the league can. He can receive the ball tight to an opponent, spin away from pressure, and still find a line-breaking pass through a crowded midfield.
Arsenal have just purchased a 6/8 that can pass the ball through the lines, that can create chances.
Against teams that sit deep and clog the middle third, which happens constantly in both the Premier League and Europe, that skill becomes even more dangerous.
Some of the passes that he's made in the last season, outside of the boot passes, breaking lines, and then timing in the final third.
Bruno doesn't panic in tight spaces, he exploits them.
He's the one that does those line-breaking passes, he's the one that gets those passes into the final third.
And the ripple effect doesn't stop with Bruno himself. Once he's playing higher and more aggressively, the players ahead of him start getting the ball in better positions. Martin Ødegaard gets fed quicker.
Now like this, Odegaard can even be more creative because you have two defensive juggernauts that can pass, that can carry the ball, that are very strong on the ball, that can intercept, so he can be free to do his stuff in front now.
Eberechi Eze gets isolated in space instead of picking the ball up in traffic. Bruno arriving late into the box, something Newcastle fans saw plenty of times, becomes a genuine goal threat for Arsenal rather than a bonus. Think about that for a second. This is the same player who used to frustrate Arsenal from the opposite dugout, the one who drag his team up the pitch and cause chaos in midfield against them specifically.
Not only does he bring leadership and mentality off the pitch, he's the guy that if he plays for you, you love him. If he doesn't play for you, you hate him. You hate him. And you've seen that. He's always so good when he plays Arsenal.
Now he's wearing the shirt, and he's built to do exactly that for Arsenal instead of against them. But to really understand how big this shift is, you have to rewind. Because none of this makes sense until you see what Bruno was actually carrying on his own. 9 goals from midfield.
Newcastle's top scorer last season with 9 goals. I think he missed 2 months of the season with injury.
Constant praise from pundits. A captain's armband at St. James Park. So, what was all that actually hiding? Because when a player puts up numbers like that while doing someone else's job at the same time, that's not just a good season. That's a warning sign about how much weight he was carrying alone.
An elite level midfielder. Because he's at Newcastle, everyone knows at Newcastle he's great, everyone knows he's good, but he does not get the credit he deserves.
At Newcastle, Bruno didn't get to pick one role and master it. He had to protect the back four, drop deep to collect the ball under pressure, spring the team forward with progressive passing, and then somehow still show up in the final third to make something happen. Most midfielders in the Premier League get to specialise. Bruno, he had to do all 4 jobs in the same 90 minutes, over and over, season after season.
He is everything to that Newcastle team. He is the heartbeat. He is the leader. He is the tonic. He is the conduit between the fans and the players.
That's not a small ask. Physically, it means covering ground defensively and then finding the legs to arrive in the box 20 minutes later. Tactically, it means constantly shifting mindset mid-game, from destroyer to creator to finisher, without ever fully switching off. He was Newcastle's primary engine.
That midfield area is a massive concern because those guys were literally the engine room, and Bruno was Newcastle United.
When Bruno had a quiet game, Newcastle usually had a quiet game too. There was no hiding that dependence, and the numbers back this up. 9 Premier League goals last season, 5 assists. On top of that, 16.2 line-breaking passes per 90 minutes, which puts him near the top of every midfielder in the country for progressing the ball through pressure. Those are the kind of numbers a lot of attacking midfielders would take, let alone someone who's also expected to shield the defense. Here's the thing though, excellent numbers don't always mean total freedom. Bruno produced all of that while still holding back part of his game, because someone had to stay disciplined defensively, and at Newcastle, that someone was almost always him. He never got the luxury of just letting go and hunting the ball with zero responsibility hanging over his head. He was Newcastle's most important player for years, genuinely irreplaceable. But he was never truly free to play with total aggression, because the moment he pushed forward, gaps opened up behind him that nobody else was covering the same way. That explains the quality he's arriving with. It doesn't explain the edge, and that's a completely different conversation. Arsenal already had midfield depth before this signing, real depth. So what was actually missing that £75 million needed to fix? The answer isn't a stat, it's a feeling. Competitive nastiness, the kind of aggression and personality that doesn't just help a player perform, but drags the standard of everyone around him up with it. Arsenal had good midfielders. What they didn't have enough of was someone who makes the opposition uncomfortable just by being on the pitch. Bruno's leadership doesn't work through team talks or armband gestures. It works through how he plays every single match like it's personal. He organizes, sure, but he also intimidates. Opponents feel him before they see him coming. That's not something you can coach into a player. Either it's there or it isn't, and Arsenal just bought a heavy dose of it. Look at what Arsenal already had in midfield. Rice, Ødegaard, Eze, Zubimendi, Merino, Lewis Skelly coming through as well.
You have Merino, look how he did at the World Cup. Look at the role he can play. You still have Eze, let it all work out. You have Odegaard, who was very good for Norway at the World Cup. So Arsenal automatically have not just the best midfield in the Premier League, but by far the best midfield depth.
That's not a thin squad by any stretch, but adding Bruno into that group doesn't crowd it out. It sharpens it, because now every one of those players is training against and playing alongside someone who refuses to let standards drop for even 5 minutes. This is where the Champions League conversation becomes direct instead of theoretical. Arsenal have had enough good squads before. They've had depth before. What's been missing on the biggest European nights is that edge, the ability to turn a tight, cagey match physical and personal when it needs to happen. Bruno has built his career doing exactly that. The timing matters here too. He's 28, already proven in the Premier League, already been through the wars at Newcastle without a single reputation dent. This is his clearest shot at the trophies that actually define a career. And he knows it.
Bruno must be thinking, I've got a chance of a Premier League medal, maybe a Champions League medal with Arsenal.
A player arriving hungry at his peak is a completely different proposition to one arriving hoping to develop into something. So this signing was never really about adding a name to the squad list. It's about weaponizing qualities that were already sitting there in Bruno, fully formed, just never given the platform to be unleashed completely. Arteta isn't going to soften any of that. He's not interested in smoothing out the aggression or toning down the personality. He's going to sharpen it, point it directly at the rest of the Premier League, and let it loose in Europe too. What Newcastle spent years relying on as their single biggest asset just became someone else's problem entirely. Bruno Guimarães, fully unleashed inside the most complete midfield in the country.